Hello, and thank you for choosing to spend some time with me while I share some ideas about how I play chess. My name is Tony Corfe, and I've been working with chess players since 1973, mainly in schools here in England, but I've also been teaching some chess in other parts of the world as well. I'm going to assume that you will know how to move all the chess pieces. I'm going to assume that you know how to set the board up correctly. And of course, having a white square on the right is the first thing. And looking at the queen to make sure that the queen is on her own colour. That means black queen goes on a black square, white queen goes on a white square. I'm very lucky in what I do because I'm able to work with people teaching chess, and I'm doing this every single day of the week. Chess is a great game. I never get tired of sitting at a chessboard and working with somebody who's learning about the game. One of the things you need to learn very early on in the game is that every single move you make is important. And you don't want to waste any moves in the beginning because otherwise your opponent will get an advantage. So if we look at the board and we begin just to think, what sort of things have we got to think about? Basically, a game of chess is a war between two armies. And during this war, there are going to be lots of different battles. So before you get into the position of starting your battles, you've got to get your good pieces into the right squares on the board so they're ready and then do their battle. A perfect game of chess, if both players choose the best moves, is likely to be a drawn game. So if somebody's going to win the game, you've got to be able to outsmart your opponent. Each game of chess usually would have three parts. You'd have an opening part of the game where you're basically moving your pieces, getting them onto really good squares ready for the battle. You have the middle game where you do your battles and you try to win more material from your opponent than you actually lose. You have to get into your head the idea that you're not going to finish a game of chess with all of your pieces on the board, but you need to protect them, but you're going to lose some of your pieces along the way. So that's the middle game. You do your battles, and the end game is where you really start thinking about winning the game. And the way you do that is to attack your opponent's king. Every time you make a move on the board which attacks the king, that's a check. And you're putting that king into a trap. If you get to a position where the king is in a trap and can't get out of the trap, then that's called checkmate and you're the winner. Unless, of course, you're in the trap and you can't get out, then you came second. We've got the board set up. Let's think about how we're going to begin playing a game of chess. And the first thing you need to do is to not touch your pieces at all. Do your thinking first before you touch a piece, because when you're playing a proper game of chess, if you touch the first piece that you touch, that's the piece you've got to move. And if you're the sort of player that likes to touch your opponent's piece first, the first piece of your opponent's that you touch, that's the one you have to take. So you're going to do your thinking. What are you going to think about? Well, every chess player, every good chess player is going to have some sort of plan, some sort of ideas in his head about where he wants to go. Now, in the first stages of learning to play chess, you'll only be thinking probably about one move at a time. But if you're going to get better and you're going to beat these opponents of yours, you're going to have to think more than one move ahead. So right from the first move, you want to think about what your strategy is going to be. And the first thing I like to do is to focus on the middle of the board. There are 4 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4 squares in the middle, and those are the focus squares at the beginning of the game. And that's almost all that I'm thinking about. So I like, first of all, usually to move a pawn which is in front of the king. The king's pawn, and I move that from e2 to e4. That puts the pawn in the middle of the board. It's on one of those 4 squares that I talked about a moment ago, and it's attacking another one. Good start to the game. Get into the middle. And I guess if it's good for white, then black is going to do the same thing. So they'll push the pawn in front of their king forward 2 squares. And now both sides are matched up, and the game is drawn at the moment. The next thing we need to think about doing is getting your pieces, the pieces on the back row, in order out and into the middle of the board. There's lots of different moves that you can make, but usually the first piece that I like players to move is the knight. It's the knight on the side where the king is, and you bring that knight out into the middle of the board. And noticing it starts on a black square, and every time you move a knight it's going to change colour. So black square to white square. And from that position there, that square is f3, knight to f3. It attacks the pawn, the black pawn, on e5. Black, first of all, has to, before they think about their move, they have to look and see what white has done. And they should notice that the white knight is attacking their black pawn. And if they were to make a move, supposing they didn't know how to play, and they decided to push a pawn on the side, then the white knight could take their move and take that black pawn. And if that was the case, then white would be a pawn up, black would be a pawn down, and black is losing the game. So the wise chess player will look first of all at the move that their opponent has made to see what threats, if any, are there on the board. And so black will notice that the white knight attacks the black pawn, and we need to defend this pawn. Now there are several ways to do it. Let me just jump straight in and say that the best move at this point is to bring the knight, which is on b8, bring it forward onto c6. So the knight on b8, which is a black square, when you move the knight it changes colour, so it's on a white square, c6, and from here it defends its own pawn, which is on e5. So now both sides have one pawn out in the middle, both sides have one knight out towards attacking the middle or defending the middle, and the game is still drawn. After you've got a knight out, we need to then bring a bishop. And the bishop I like to bring out, well, the only one we can bring here of course, is the bishop that's on f1, and I need to bring it out along this white diagonal. Now at this point you'll have a choice of where to choose. You can either stop here on c4, or you can go on to b5. Both of those moves, both of those squares are good moves for white, and you can choose. And a little later on you'll learn about what type of game you're playing with those moves. So let's just say I'm going to go there to c4. Now, one of the reasons for starting and bringing out those two pieces out, you'll notice now that between the king and the rook we have two empty squares, and that means I'm preparing for castling. At some point soon you'll be thinking that castling is a good move to make, and you will choose the right time to castle in the game. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Right, so at this point on the board then, it's black's turn to move, but white is leading this game because they've got two pieces out already. Black has only one. Now black knows that they've got to try and match white, so they're going to decide to bring out another piece, and they're going to choose to bring their bishop, and they're going to put the bishop here on that square. Now that's d6. We'll hear in a minute whether we think that's a good move or not. White is not being threatened by anything from black, so they can continue with their normal moves. And in the opening I usually like players only to make two pawn moves, and for white now I'm going to make that second move, and I'm going to play the pawn in front of the queen, and I'm going to push that forward to d3. That's one square, and from that square it's now protecting the pawn on e4 and also the bishop on c4. But that pawn move has a very special reason for making that move, a special purpose. And that special purpose is to allow this bishop on c1, it's opening up the diagonal line now, and the bishop can then at some point later on come out here along this diagonal, possibly going up here. The reason to be going there is because I'm going to attack the queen. Attack, a very important word that chess players need to know. You don't win a game unless you know how to attack. So we'll just put this bishop back for the moment, and you can see here now, as I was saying before, this was a bad move for black to put their bishop on d6. Can you see why? So let's spend a moment and just think about this castling, because both sides have now prepared to castle. I've already said it's a good idea to castle, and in most games both players will castle. First of all, under the laws of chess, if you're going to castle, you must touch the king first. You must touch the king first, and the king makes the unusual move of going two squares towards the rook. Then you let go of the king, touch the rook, and the rook does the unusual move of jumping over the king and coming down beside the king. That's called castling. And there are two reasons for castling. One is to push your king towards the corner of the board. That makes it harder for your opponent to get at. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that if you move your rook, later on you'll be able to move your rook across to e1, and that's developing your rook and bringing it up through the towards the middle of the board. And the most important thing you remember right from the very beginning, the most important thing at the beginning of the game is to attack the middle of the board. And that's how Castle King can do that. Let's undo the castling, and we'll go back here now. Having just looked at the how good a move castling is, remembering that in most games you will castle, that's one of two special moves in a game of chess, and I've taken all the pieces off the board just to show you the second and final special move. It's really important, this one, but it's not used as often as castling. You could play 100 games and never use this move. I remember many years ago in a tournament where one player forgot all about this move and played a pawn move, which I'll show you in a moment, and his opponent knew the move, the special move, which is called en passant, and that person then went on to win the game. Having learned the move, special move, which is used in many chess games, there is one more special move which I have removed all the pieces from the board except these pawns, and we now need to look at this here. Let's assume that look at the position where the white pawn has got to the first, second, third, fourth, fifth rank, so it's made its way up the board, and the pawns at either side of it have not yet come into the game. Black might be thinking that they can move one of their pawns and come forward 2 squares to get past this pawn. But this second special move, which is called en passant, would allow white's pawn to take the black pawn as if it had gone forward just 1 square. So white pawn would take the black pawn in passing. Just show you that once more, and let's just do it on the other side. That this pawn here, the e pawn, moves 2 squares to come up beside your pawn, and you can take it as if it's only gone forward 1 square. And just to finish the rules about en passant, you must do it, if you're going to do it, you must do it on the next move, your next move. You're not allowed to move one other piece and then come back and say, remember that pawn, I'm now going to take it en passant. That doesn't happen. Okay, and en passant is a move which doesn't happen very often. One of the advantages for white, after black has moved 2 squares and white has taken that pawn en passant, is that it now leaves a clear pathway for this white pawn to get across complete its journey to get to the other side of the board. So let's just say black now runs away. The white pawn goes on 1 square, getting very close now to the other side of the board. Black can play here, and the white pawn completing the journey right the way across to the other side, and arrives at a square which we call the queening square. And what we mean by queening square is that that pawn can be promoted to a different piece, and it can be any piece at all other than another king or another pawn. Usually it's a queen, and what we do is we take the pawn off the board and we put the queen on the square where the pawn was, and that's called queening a pawn. With a few more pieces on the board, let's have a look and see how we might use this idea of promoting a pawn to a queen. It's in this position, it's white's turn to move, and although you might think it's a good idea to promote that pawn and have a queen straight away, there's a move you've got to make first. And first of all, what we'll do is to use the bishop, and we'll come in there and we'll say check. And of course, once you are checking your opponent, that stops the whole game. I mean, black must have been thinking, I've got really good chances here. They've got a queen on the board, and white hasn't got any. But the whites being able to give a check with the bishop stops the game. Black can't get a chance to use their queen. They've got to deal with the check. And the only move available to black is to put the king onto h8. And can you see now what we might be able to do in this position? hopefully you remembered about queening a pawn, because this is exactly the right moment to do that. And so you play the pawn onto the queening square, you take your queen and you put it on the square where the pawn was, or it arrived on the queening square, and you notice that the queen is now attacking the king all the way along the back row there, and therefore when you attack the king it's check, and the king, the black king, has nowhere to go, and therefore it's in a trap, can't get out of it. The answer is it's checkmate, and all that came from when you queened your pawn. Black and white are fairly even here, but with the queen against a rook and a knight. It's white's turn to move, and white is trying to consider the best way to attack. And when you're attacking the king, of course, you're trying to check. Now, if you're looking at this position, hopefully you might be working out your move. And white decides to come really close to the king and decides that this is the best move, for the best square for the white queen. So they come down here and they say check. When you attack the king, you say check. Now, when you are in check, there are three questions that you need to ask yourself. First of all, to look at the piece that's causing the check and ask yourself, can I take the piece that's causing the check? Second question you ask is, can I block the check? Can I put a piece in the way? Third question is, can I move my king to a safe square? So once again, can I take, can I block, can I move? And chess players should ask all three questions every time you're in check. So let's have a look at the position now. And the first question was, can I take? Yes, I can. The queen is attacking the king, and see where my knight is here? The knight can come and take the queen, and if the queen's not there, then that is black is not in check. And with that was a very big mistake by white to put their queen on e7, lost their queen, and now black has every chance to win. But let's just go back again. We've come down here, we've said check. The three questions. Can I take the piece causing the check? Yes, I can take the queen. But let's look at the other two questions just to make the choice as to what's better. So the second question was, can I block? Yes, I can block. I can put my rook in the way, and now my king, the black king, is not in check. So yes, I can take, yes, I can block, and the third question was, can I move? Yes, I can move to a safe square. The king can go to g8, and the king is now out of check, and the game can proceed. So in this position, we can answer yes to all three questions. If the answers to the questions were no, I can't take, no, I can't block, and no, I can't move my king to a safe square, then that means that it is not only check, but it's checkmate. You are in a trap, you can't get out of it, you lose the game. We've looked at the two special moves in a game of chess, and now I've put all the pieces back on the board, and let's begin looking again at the opening. Remember, the most important thing at the beginning of the game is to attack the middle of the board, and that's why we play the pawn in front of the king to e4. Black doesn't really remember what to do, doesn't know what to do, and decides to play a pawn